South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster will deliver his first State of the State address from Columbia on tomorrow night. And afterwards, South Carolina gubernatorial candidate Phil Noble will deliver his own Democratic response. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with Phil Noble one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores.
Well, Phil, it is so good to see you again.
Thank you. It's good to be with you again.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Well, let me take you to the obvious. And this is the headline coming from a press release that was sent out by your particular campaign. It reads this: Phil Noble to deliver his response to the State of the State address via internet live streaming. And this is the actual headline in the article. Democratic gubernatorial candidate Phil Noble will deliver his response to Governor Henry McMaster's State of the State address tomorrow night via the internet. You will look into the eyes of those voters of South Carolina and tell them what?
I tell them that we have a wonderful state with enormous potential, but we have a corrupt and broken political system in Columbia that's holding us back from achieving that potential. That's really the message of what I think my campaign is about. But it's also sort of the opposite, if you will, of what we're going to hear at the State of the State from Governor McMaster or from James Smith, who will give the Democratic response. I mean, the reality is that our state has been essentially run like a plantation. And what we've got is the same people who benefit from that system are making the decisions. They're making the decisions about our education, our health care, our abusive tax system, and the rest of us are the ones who are suffering. We're the ones who are having to pay the price for it. And so I expect from Governor McMaster and James Smith sort of more of the same. I would expect that you hear sort of political platitudes about how everything's bright and wonderful in the state, but we have challenges, et cetera, et cetera. It'll be pretty much the same old that we've been hearing for, 10, 15, 20 years in this state.
3 days ago, the United States government was on a shutdown. What's your message to really the United States Congress and President Trump?
Yeah, well, I think what's happening in Washington is exactly the same thing that's happening in South Carolina. We have a broken, corrupt, dysfunctional system in Columbia. It's driven by special interest, political action commission money that goes to politicians to essentially buy their vote, to get them to vote for tax reform or whatever it is that the special interest is supporting. The exact same thing is happening in South Carolina. I mean, Governor McMaster is calling for a 1% across the board tax cut. Well, we have enormous needs in this state, and the 1% of the tax cut that he's going to propose, just like Donald Trump's, we go to the wealthiest folks in this state who need it the least. And I think that's a plantation mentality that has been the governing ethos of our state, Democrat or Republican, for way too long. And it's the same thing in Washington. It's a broken system.
Let me get back to Columbia. Utilities. We hear utilities.
Yeah.
Where should that discussion go next, in your mind?
Yeah. Well, what's happened with the utilities is just the biggest and most expensive and most outrageous example of what I'm talking about. Back in 2007, the utilities got together and essentially passed a piece of legislation through the legislature that allowed them to set in motion these events that have led to this disaster. I mean, that's it. They got a special piece of legislation through the legislature. And the legislature has become essentially just sort of a bought and paid for subsidiary of utilities. And if they say this is what we want, it's what they get. And so what they said is, we want to build these nuclear power plants and we want the consumers to pay for them in advance. We want to be guaranteed 10% profit, and we want protection so that if we screw this up and the whole thing goes bad, we still get our money. Now that's a heck of a deal. And that's what they got. And so what they do, they started trying to build a power plant. They screwed it up. The whole thing went south. They turned around and said, we want our money anyway. And so the consumers in this state are being asked to pay $9 billion for a power plant that we didn't need, they didn't want, and the only people who made this happen are the legislature and those regulators that the legislature appointed.
Do the consumers of South Carolina need offshore drilling or not in your mind?
No.
That was easy.
My position on offshore drilling is very simple.
Okay.
No, never, no how, no place, no time, nobody.
Okay. Well, Democratic gubernatorial candidate Phil Noble, thank you so much for your time. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
this.
I appreciate you asking me.
Anytime.
All right.
I'll see you on King Street or wherever around town.
Well, someplace.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.